You're listening to the Bail in the Midwest podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Bail in the Midwest podcast, where we explore a variety of topics related to bail, pretrial release, and the criminal justice system in the Midwest. My name is Shane Rolf. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Kansas Bail Agents Association, and I've worked in this field for the past 35 years. As bail bondsmen, we are primarily involved in the pretrial portion of the criminal justice system. That is, the portion of the process that occurs between arrest and sentencing, or dismissal if the defendant is lucky. One of the primary reasons for even having bail is to allow the accused defendant, but not yet convicted defendant, to remain out of custody, help in his own defense, and maintain his life as normally as he can, while dealing with the life-altering event that is a criminal charge. In the words of the late Bernie Mac, people come to us when they're in trouble and we bail them out. But what happens after the court appearances have been made, after the sentence has been imposed, and after that sentence has been served? A defendant who has been convicted often has to carry the scarlet letter of that conviction with him for years and years after the fact, long after his quote-unquote debt to society has been paid. And while some violent offenders and career criminals most definitely deserve to wear this mark for all time, many do not. Crime, after all, is a young man's game for the most part, and people do tend to age out of criminal behavior. So what can we as a society do to let those who are deserving of a second chance cleanse themselves of this, for lack of a better term, sin? What we're talking about today is expungement, which is one way for certain defendants to return to society without having to carry the stigma of a criminal conviction. My guest today is Joy Springfield, an attorney and the director of Pro Bono services at Kansas Legal Services, which is often referred to in a shorthand manner as legal aid. Joy, welcome to the program.
Nice to meet you, Shane.
Nice to meet you too. If you could, maybe give us your kind of brief bio and background. I always kind of let guests, kind of talk themselves up because I never know what they want to focus on. How you came to be a lawyer, what led you down this path? I know that, sort of public advocacy, and that's typically not a very lucrative path for an attorney, and you still got to pay those law school bills. So how did you end up doing this work?
Well, I went to Howard University undergrad and in finance and minor in Spanish. And my dad said, "What are you going to do next?" I said, "I don't know." He was like, "Go to law school." I'm like, "Okay." And so I went to law school on the East Coast in Baltimore. And then I somehow got my way over to Kansas because my mother lived here. So I came out to Kansas and I practiced private firm, Shakardi and Bacon, for numerous years doing, let's say, like tobacco litigation, medical device litigation. And on the side, I did a lot of pro bono. I even won a couple of pro bono awards from KBA, that's the Kansas Bar Association. So I did pro bono in family law, divorce, adoption, expungements, transgender name changes, etc. I just love doing pro bono. So during the pandemic, I saw this opportunity come up and I was like, should I apply? And so I did. And so it's been about a year and a couple of months since I joined Kansas Legal Services as the director of Pro Bono Services. And I really love it, but I'm the statewide, Kansas Legal Services covers the entire state. So I have to go around the state because I don't want anybody to be left out on the services that we can provide. So that's the short version of my background.
I really think that you would find that to be really fulfilling. I know that when I do, volunteer work, as limited as that is with my time, you really have a feeling that you're helping people. And I know that just in the line of work that I'm in, bail bonds, is that people are always asking me for legal advice. And I have to basically stress very importantly, I'm not an attorney. This may be my opinion, but don't take that as gospel because I may not know what I'm talking about. But there is definitely a need out there for people to have access to attorneys, even people who can't afford them, and just need that sort of advice. I mean, we're a litigious society. There's lots of legalese in everything we do, and being able to at least consult with an attorney is very important to people. So that has to be fulfilling for you as well.
It is, but it's also kind of, I don't want to say depressing because we have like 11 offices around the state and we have about 50 attorneys. So we have to have private attorneys to help us. And that's where I come in, trying to get private attorneys to give some of their time to help people, because there's a huge justice gap in Kansas and in the nation, but definitely in Kansas and a lot of rural areas. There might be one or two attorneys, maybe. So we're trying to help people while we're trying to fight that and repair some of that.
Well, in some of these small rural communities, they're sort of insular. I mean, and so you have a lawyer that's there. I remember a judge in Johnson County told me years and years ago he had moved from a more rural area up to a more urban area that we're in, suburban, I guess, more than urban. But he was talking about the people in his old hometown, referring to that new city lawyer that moved in. It's like, Dad, that guy's been there for 35 years. He's not that new city lawyer. He's been there the whole time. But that was still, these are the people that are from this area and somebody that came in from the outside. And so if you're in a farming community and you didn't go to law school and then come back to help your town, there's going to be fewer people there. I know that my family kind of grew up in a rural area as well. And, there was actually a train stop that came by the town. It was a small town called Aliceville in Kansas. That's not even incorporated anymore. I mean, there was a passenger train that came to that town. The town maybe has 50 people in it now. So, I mean, you do have a lot of people moving out of these rural areas in Kansas and all rural areas all around the Midwest. And so that's going to have an impact on the availability of lawyers. Lawyers need a certain volume of people to help them out. So, I mean, the work that you guys do is really important.
Yeah. And then also I found out, I was thinking about it. You're in a small rural area, and you might know everybody. So you, as an attorney, you might be conflicted out on helping A and B because you already helped B against A. And so now you can't help this person, so having like clinics and stuff like that we do, it helps to get private attorneys together with clients that need their help and for free.
Well, and again, I mean, we're getting off track on this a little bit, but I know one of the John Grisham books, I can't remember which one it was, but there was one of the central characters was the son of the local judge. And, that judge basically, was the only judge, and there were only a handful of attorneys in the whole town. And so the judge ended up, I think it was the one that they made a movie out of with Robert Downey Jr. As the attorney. But basically the judge was there and they wanted to keep it local because, he'd heard cases from everybody there, and half the population would have hated him and half of them would have liked him based on the ruling. Anyway, it's just another example of the sorts of conflicts you run into when you have small communities and not a whole lot of people there.
Yes.
Well, before we go too far off in the weeds of movies and small towns, let's talk about expungement a little bit. Can you kind of give us kind of a broad definition of what expungement is? So when we say we get something expunged, what exactly do we mean to that?
Well, it means different things in different locations. Some states, when they say expungement, they really do destroy the record. But in Kansas, I guess you could say we hide it from the public. So your record cannot be seen by the public. However, if you have something happens and you're involved with law enforcement again, or if you want to get a gun, or if you want to become a private eye, or if you want to work for a casino, or if you want to work for like federal government, somewhere they're going to see your record. And so they'll see what charges got expunged. They'll be able to see that. There are sites that keep that information on that you have to, be proactive and tell them to remove that information off of there.
Okay, so like, internet sites, particularly in this day and age, that have scraped data from different sources, and then they haven't deleted theirs, even though the court system itself is closed off and you can't see it. Some of the, mugshots.com or some of these other types of places that have scraped that data and put it on their sites, then you've got to do a bunch of work to try and get that cleaned out. And you did. One of the things that I didn't know until a few years ago was, the Kansas Bail Agents Association. And I'm also, in addition to the vice president or the executive vice president, I'm the legislative chair. So I get to go up and talk to the legislature about these things. But we were trying to get a licensing regimen for bail enforcement agents because we wanted to make sure that we were not getting a bunch of bounty hunters or bail enforcement agents that were, convicted felons and people with criminal histories. And so we put some restrictions in that both bail bondsmen and bail enforcement agents could not have a felony conviction unless that felony conviction had been expunged. And so when we met with the Attorney General's office to go over how exactly that would work, because turns out they're the licensing agency for the bail enforcement agents. And so they laid that all out, and we're like, well, what about expungement? But they were requiring you to disclose your criminal history to them, whether or not it had been expunged, as part of the application process. So you had to state, and if it turns out they found out that was there and you'd lied about it, even though it was expunged, you would lose your license. It was like they used the same format that you referenced before for private detectives. If you were trying to get a private detective's license, you wouldn't necessarily be excluded from getting that if your record had been expunged, but you still have to disclose that when you're applying for that license, so they can make some sort of determination if there's something mildly violent or something like that in your history. They want to know about that stuff before they approve it.
Yes, because if you apply for like a regular job and you had your charges expunged, your case expunged, so when they would ask you, have you ever been convicted of a felony, you can say no, because it's been expunged on a regular job, but not those that are excluded. Yeah.
Right. Those sorts of. So, I mean, if you want to go get a job at the NSA or something like that, they're probably going to be able to see these sorts of records.
And if they say, have you better say yes. You better give them all your information, because then they'll say you're not being honest. Right.
Exactly. So how does expungement work for an arrest that did not result in a conviction? Is that still part of the expungement process, or is that just something you have to petition the court to try and get those records sealed? So you were arrested for a charge and it was dismissed.
Yeah. That is my pet peeve. But anyway, Shane, if you get arrested and and it's dismissed or they drop the charges, you still have to ask the court to expunge your arrest record. It's not automatic. And then you got to pay to get it expunged. $200, $195.
That was going to be a question I had about cost later on here, is how much it costs. So I know that there was a bill before the legislature this session, and I know you're not political, but I'm sort of a legislative nerd, so I look at these things. But one of the things was to create an automatic expungement upon a dismissal, even a dismissal without prejudice. And I know that the district attorney's office association came and testified against that, being automatic. I think they're arguing. If I remember, I listened to that testimony, and I think it was something along the lines of, well, we'd like to have the time expire for our refiling before, on a dismissal without prejudice. Anyway, I'm sure it'll get tweaked a little bit and come back, next session, but it was timed out this session. But that was a concern that has been brought up to the legislature as well.
I don't know. They do the same thing with juvenile offenses. So
that was going to be my next question.
Great minds.
Yeah.
So you still have to, if you have a juvenile, charge, you still have to petition for an expungement. I think it should be automatic. Like when you reach 18 or whatever the age, 23 or 2 years without any issue, it should be expunged automatically. But some states do that, I believe.
Do you know if Candace does the same thing for diversion agreements? So, I mean, you're arrested. For people that are not familiar, the diversion's a program that the prosecutor's office offers, and that if you successfully complete that, then the case is dismissed and you don't have a conviction. But for certain things like DUIs, it still counts as a conviction towards any future DUIs, that sort of thing. But how are diversion agreements, are those sorts of dismissals? Do you still have to do the same thing expungement wise for those?
Yes, you do. You can give the $195 and file the petition for expungement. Yep.
So on the $195, is there any sort of poverty waiver that you can do? So like if you're filing a lawsuit and you can't afford it, you can request a poverty waiver to, waive some of the filing costs or even all of them.
Yes.
Is that available on expungement? Do you know?
Yes. If especially if you go through Kansas Legal Services, because we'll get your financial information. We'll see if you qualify for our services, and we know you qualify probably for a poverty affidavit. So we will file that for you as well. So if you go through Kansas Legal Services or you participate in one of our clinics, we'll do the petition, we'll do your poverty affidavit, we'll do your proposed order as well. Get all that paperwork done for you. Either we will file it for you or we'll give you the documents, and they're prepared by an attorney. And that's what they say on the bottom, and you can file them in the court when we do a clinic.
So expungement, like we mentioned, does not actually do away with the conviction, like say a pardon would do. So, I mean, if
Right.
you were pardoned by the president or the governor, you are no longer convicted, period. If depending on the language of the pardon. I mean, if it's, you were pardoned from this crime, you didn't happen, or just commuted, and those are all different legal terms. But so an expungement is not the same as a pardon, but essentially just seals the record so people can't see it. So like
Correct.
if you're going to go out and try and, get an apartment, that sort of thing.
And a lot of licenses, other than the ones we said, like people that want to get their CNA or they want to go back to school and stuff like that, the expungement helps them do that, helps them be able to get their license, whatever profession, barber or nursing, or go back to school, get a loan. So that helps them do that.
Well, let's kind of get into that too, and this should be one of the arguments for expungement, because I've in preparation of us talking, I've listened to some different arguments on this, but expungement obviously has a number of benefits for the defendant whose record is now sealed. And can you expand? What are some of the benefits that the people derive from getting those records expunged?
I think my argument is it's for the community as a whole, for society. These are benefits for all of us. We get more and better job opportunities, so increase your wages, which helps everybody because they can buy more stuff. Better educational opportunities, go back to school, which helps all of us having an educated workforce and people that are involved in our politics being educated. That would be great. More options for housing because a lot of people are locked out of housing or they have to take lower standard housing that might not be healthy because they have nowhere else to live. You can also, if you need it, you can apply for public assistance because a lot of times if you have, some kind of charge or a criminal record, you cannot get public assistance. And you might need it. You might need SNAP because you can't, you don't have a good job, you need SNAP or a housing voucher. Maybe you have a disability now. So you need that, but having those charges on you, just, it hurts you, it hurts your family. Also, I think it helps you make a difference in your community. You feel better about yourself. That stigma of having a criminal record is lifted off of you and you feel better and you want to help others and pay it forward. Also, I heard it might lower your insurance premiums. And I think also just for privacy reasons, you don't have to look around, thinking people know all your business is out there. Because, the court records they're pretty public. So you could look somebody up on the court record and see if they have any charges that are your neighbors or stuff like that. So,
well, one of the things that we've talked about on this podcast, and one of the things that I push a lot is the use of the criminal justice system as a deterrent. And I think you could make a pretty good argument that the expungement creates a deterrent to future criminal activity itself, because if you had to go through everything, get your record expunged, you certainly don't want to put yourself in a position where you're going to end up with an additional criminal conviction and have to start that whole process all over again. Versus, say, someone who they didn't get it expunged. Well, whatever, I don't really care if I pick up this other charge. I know that all they're going to do is, slap me with a fine or put me on probation or whatever. It's not going to have any further negative impact on me. Versus if my record's been cleaned up, am I going to walk the line a little bit, more carefully to where I don't end up back in that situation? So, I mean, I think there's additionally an argument for expungement works as a deterrent to future criminal activity.
Yeah, especially when you find out all the hoops you have to go through in order to get an expungement. How much time you have to wait before you can get an expungement, and then the money you got to pay out, stuff that you have to do. And so definitely. So
I know that other states have looked at this, and I know the federal government has kind of looked at other options. I know that the federal government, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe the federal government does not have any sort of expungement option written into the federal statute. So if you have a federal conviction, I don't think there's any way to get that off your record other than a presidential pardon. Does that sound about right?
I agree. It sounds about right. I know there's like a little bitty exception. I think it's a drug charge, but other than that, I don't know. Other than that, what you said sounds correct. I've had people that come with federal charges. I'm like, it's nothing we can do.
Well, I know that when we were working on getting the restrictions in place where you couldn't have a felony conviction unless it was expunged, somebody's like, well, that's going to put me out of business. I'm like, why? Get it expunged? Well, I can't. Like, well, sorry, maybe you shouldn't be in this line of work anyway. But I know at the federal level, and we get this in various states, but I know it's been brought up at the federal level as well, is programs like Ban the Box. So basically, to where you cannot ask a potential employer whether or not they have a criminal conviction. And largely, I think the argument that was made at that point in time was, well, you can still do a background check out and find out later on in the process that they have this criminal conviction, but you can't just rule them out straight off the bat. So can you kind of compare and contrast like ban the box type arguments compared to expungement?
Ban the box is good so they can get a job, and then while they're working, making money and everything, then they can work on their expungement. I don't think it would be good to have both. So if they do, I didn't know they would do a background check after you're hired, because I'd hate for people to get hired and then get fired. You know what I mean?
Well, or certainly further along in the hiring process,
Right. Okay.
your application is not rejected just out of hand because you check this box. Whereas if you have a theft charge, we don't necessarily want you working at this bank teller, that sort of thing. That was the argument. But I think
that's great, but it would give me anxiety knowing that, okay, I passed this one step of my employment, and then here they might be able to find out. I'd rather, if it was me, have it expunged, knowing that it's not there for them to see.
Well, let's talk about some of the public activities that are done to encourage expungement. In my area, Mark Dupree, who's the district attorney in Wyandotte County, and I met Mark first when he was in the Johnson County Public Defender's Office. So he definitely comes into the prosecutor's office from the public defender angle of things. But I know that he has been providing both time and staff on at least 2 to 3 occasions each year for what they've referred to as an expungement fair. And basically his staff is there and they will help walk people through. If you want to try and get that going, his staff will help walk you through that. And it's my understanding that Kansas Legal Services is also putting on similar clinics to assist people with beginning the process. I know you sort of touched on it earlier. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, we had some of our staff there in December at the Wyandotte County Expungement Fair. So we help with that. We had a expungement clinic in Manhattan, Kansas. We had one in Leavenworth. We had one somewhere else we didn't want to. This year, we're going to be doing expungement clinic in Wichita. We're going to do one in Gary County. We're going to do one in Great Bend, and I think in Fort McPherson, and a couple other places, maybe Garden City we're looking at. And Johnson County. We're going to do an expungement clinic in Johnson County as well. So what we do is they just apply with Kansas Legal Services. I make sure they're eligible, and I let them know you're eligible, and to come to the clinic, or we'll assign them to an attorney, a pro bono private attorney. And so there's no filing, no fees from the attorney. So it's free pro bono legal assistance. And if you qualify, then we'll do the poverty affidavit as well. So there won't be any filing fees. Then we send it to the court. And most likely though, we've already talked to like the DA or the county attorney to make sure, find out what their limitations are, when they're going to do it, and et cetera, like that. It should be approved easily, no hearing, or if there's something weird, it might be a hearing. But usually there's no hearing, and you'll get your paperwork in the mail saying that your case has been expunged, and you're not going to be able to find it on the court system in a couple of weeks.
So as an attorney, I mean, I assume that you guys are always looking for volunteers and people to help out on those sorts of things.
Yes.
And this is, you have a finance background, but as an attorney, does donating their time to a pro bono type situation like that, are there tax benefits to the attorneys about that? I mean, is there a selling point you can make to that other than just, hey, this is a moral good, and you can give back to the community this way? But is there a financial benefit to attorneys that volunteer their time for this sort of thing?
I never thought of it that way. I usually say, because I was licensed in Maryland first, and Maryland's like, you have to do pro bono. It is part of your responsibility to give back to the community, help people that don't have access to lawyers, because you're supposed to represent everybody should have an attorney, be able to get legal advice when necessary. And we live in, a legal desert. It's part of your duty as an attorney to give back and do something. And it doesn't take that much time. And I don't know about financial, but people know other people. You never know. Someone says, oh, you helped them. So maybe they might have a person they might refer you to. Also, there's always option, the opportunities to win awards for pro bono work, if that gets you, or in your law firm, maybe there's a little competition for pro bono. How many hours of pro bono somebody does? Some firms I know we did like 50 hours of pro bono work counted billable hours. So that's something to get people to do more pro bono as well. It's part of our oath. We're supposed to make sure that people have legal representation. We shouldn't stop them. Just because they can't afford it, we should not stop them from having legal representation.
Well, and I know that for years and years and years before the Johnson County Public Defender's Office actually had an office, or the state's AID fund actually had a dedicated office in Johnson County, the tried and true method of building up your practice as a criminal attorney was show up and take every last appointment that the court would give you. One, it gave you practice, and two, it got your name out there. And so then you were dealing with the clientele basis. And so when their friend or their family member or somebody else got in trouble and that person could actually hire a lawyer, well, this guy or woman, he did a great job for me on this case and get that. So I guess one of the arguments, I guess, is the selling point for doing this pro bono work, aside from, hey, it's just your obligation, because that doesn't always sell. But it is a way, particularly for younger lawyers, to build up their practice, build up their experience. Because there's a lot of lawyers that they don't go out to a firm to start off and get saddled with the 80 hours of billable time a week that they've got to put in. They've got to build practices. This is one way to do that. You get exposure to the public and get some experience dealing with clients, judges, attorney, district attorneys, everybody involved in the process. But if somebody wanted to volunteer their time or their finances, how would they do that with Kansas Legal Service? I think there is a method for that, right? Or mechanism.
Yeah. But to me, volunteering is fun. You get to meet attorneys, you get to meet judges, you get to have one-on-one, client contact. At the firm, you might never see a client. You get, and we like not just criminal defense attorneys or people that are familiar with criminal work, any attorney, a transactional attorney, or someone that was like me doing pharmaceutical litigation, any type of attorney, we can train you to handle an expungement. We can train you what questions to ask if you have to go to court. I think with the pandemic helped us see that we had other options, and a lot of judges now will do Zoom hearings if it's required. So maybe you can help somebody way out on the West or whatever, and you can appear by Zoom if that's necessary. But they can contact me, Joy Springfield at Kansas Legal Services. Do you want me to give my email address?
If you want it out there in the public, sure, absolutely.
I might regret this. Springfield J. So Springfield, my first initial J at klsinc.org. Or you just go to the Kansas Legal Services website, and I'm sure they'll have some way to contact me.
Okay, so just Google Kansas Legal Services, and
Yes.
that should at least get a start. I know they've got a big. I hit the website before this, and so they're pretty good on that.
I say, and if you look up expungement on our website, it'll take you a big page and it'll show you all kinds of stuff about expungements. Lots of info.
Excellent. One of the other things that's on there I kind of wanted to talk about was the offender registry. So in addition to just carrying around the stigma of a criminal conviction, Kansas has a fairly robust offender registry. And while this registry, which is publicly available online, and I've got a story about that, primarily began as a sex offender registry, and those are often lifetime registration requirements for sex offenders, and that's probably not going to go away. But in Kansas, it has expanded to include both violent crime and drug offenders. How does one go about trying to get one's name off of these registries? Because I know it looked like your Kansas Legal Services was looking at that as well.
Yeah, we helped with, and I'll give props to our former executive director, Marilyn Harp. I think they went and spoke with the legislature about doing something about the drug registry. Because if you get on the drug registry, you're on there for 15 years. And that's a big chunk of time for By the time you get on there, say you're in your 20s, 30s, you come out, you're like 45, 50. And you've been on there. And while you're on there, you cannot get an expungement. So what they did, they improved it. So if you're on the direct registry for 5 years, you can petition for relief to get removed from the direct registry. And then you can petition for an expungement. So that's a big change, 10 years down. So we had a drug registry clinic in Wichita earlier this year, I think February 3rd, matter of fact, to help people get off the drug registry. Now, those same people are eligible to get an expungement, and we're doing the expungement clinic and starting in April. So I'll reach back out to those people to see you ready to do your expungement. Now we can do your expungement. And every county is different, which is crazy. So like Johnson County, we can do it together, but Wichita wants it separate. So we do it however they want.
Really? That's unusual. Any sheriff's office that has a robust website will have an offender registry map on it as well. I know Johnson County does. And you can go in there and you can just hit your map and boom, all these little dots show up of everybody that's around. And it's like, and so you can tell which neighborhoods, exactly, what sort of trouble you've been in, what's going on here. Well, hey, that guy 2 blocks down the street.
Like he seemed nice.
Yeah, exactly. But he's this violent offender registry. What's going on with that? I had every now and then it's an online, it's not as much an online scam, but it's a telephone scam that people will call up, and it's the bail bond scam. And hey, you've got this warrant, or we just posted your bond, and people will I've had people call my office and go, hey, you just called me and said I need to bring you some more money. I'm like, no, I didn't. But it was a big nationwide thing for a while. They would scan, they'd somebody go through in the releases, and they'd wait a couple days, and then they'd somehow get a telephone number for the person that was bonded out, and then call and demand that they go to Walmart and send some Walmart gift cards, or they were going to come pick him up. Clearly, anytime they bring up the Walmart gift card thing, that's a scam.
That's a scam.
Right. But there were other ones. Hey, you got to meet us here and give us some cash. So I had a guy call me, and he was on the offenders registry, and it was a sexual offender registry, and it was a lifetime registration, and it was for a crime that occurred 20 years prior. And so he calls and goes, I need to see about posting the bond. And so I'm like looking up his stuff and trying to figure out what's going on with that. And I call the warrants division and go, does this guy have a warrant? Because all I'm seeing is this 20-year-old case. And they're like, no, we don't see anything. And so I call him back and go, tell me again what happened. And so basically somebody had called him up and told him that there was an offender registry violation, and there was a $10,000 warrant issued for his arrest, and he needed to bring them $1,000 to come turn himself in. Well, whatever the deal was, he didn't meet with them, but he started calling around other bonding companies, and it's like, that is a complete scam.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess it's important to have it out there, but also understand that it can be abused. I mean, there's the classic meme about the best place to rob is the sex offender registry, because they can't have any guns in their house. But
I have not seen that one.
Yeah, it's sort of an old joke. So let's get back to expungement just a little bit. And I know that you're not full-blown expert in this, but you clearly have a certain degree of experience. Can you get in the weeds a little bit and kind of give us what are the statutory, just in general terms, the statutory criteria for getting an expungement? I mean, do we have time frames? And I know that some charges are excluded. Can you kind of give us kind of an overview of that?
Misdemeanors, 3-year wait. There's certain levels of drugs, certain levels of non-drugs that are 3 years. More serious, it'd be 5 years for felonies. Things that will not be expunged, rape, murder, anything dealing with children will not be expunged. Driving, which is crazy, driving while suspended, 5-year wait. I'm like, what?
That seems like a long time.
I know, right?
Particularly given all the different ways your driver's license can be suspended. I mean, it's one of the arguments that I've had for a while is that the current method of dealing with traffic failures to appear was supposed to be, because I've been doing this a long time. 35 years ago when I started doing this, if you missed court on your speeding ticket, they'd issue a warrant for your arrest. And you're driving down the street and they pick you up on that warrant. Now they don't do that. If you have a non-jailable offense, they won't issue a warrant for your arrest, but they'll suspend your driver's license. And so then you continue to drive, and then you get stopped for a driving while suspended, and that is a jailable offense or
Yeah.
potentially jailable offense. And so then that driving while suspended just steamrolls on you, because now you have a reinstatement fee that you've got to pay, and now you've got this driving while suspended ticket, whatever the underlying ticket was. And if you don't stop driving, if you've already got this learned behavior that I don't have to go to court, well, then I'm going to drive again, and now I've got another one.
Yes.
And so it can just, the driving while suspended thing can just be devastating to people. So
Yes,
it does seem like it's 5 years is a long time to get that expunged.
Yeah, we're going to do some clinics on driving while suspended as well, in Great Bend and somewhere else. I can't remember, but yeah, we're doing that too. Yeah, that's one of the things I was like, what? That doesn't jive with me. I don't understand. But yeah, those are usually the breakdowns. And I know a lot of people have asked me, oh, can I get my gun back? Because Kansas said I can get my gun. I'm like, I wouldn't do that. I advise you not to do that. Yeah, I'm not an expert, but I think federal law trumps the state. And right now, if you're caught with a gun, you get 15 years. So don't do that.
If they charge you federally.
Yeah. Well, if you have a gun, you're a felon. Yeah, with a gun, federal. I wouldn't risk it. But they could call like a federal public defender office and ask them.
Right.
And that's what I advise. Ask an attorney that does that all the time if you should get a gun with your background.
Well, let's kind of hit some of the the counterpoints on some of this too, because there's always a counterpoint. And so generally you want to know the argument of the other side, as well as your own argument. So I assume you would have some of this down. But what are some of the arguments against both the expanded expungement and quite frankly expungement as a whole? I mean, what would be some of the arguments that people would make against expungement? I mean, there's obviously the tough on crime aspect of it, but what are some of the other potential arguments?
I don't know. Well, they just don't want to give anybody a second chance. I don't know. We, probably because I'm pro expungement. So
right. Yeah, exactly.
You have them. I know we did the study with Harvard Law, and it just helps so many people once they get an expungement. And only thing I can say you're against it is that you want people to suffer for the rest of their life about something they had an error or did something wrong one time or twice or three, but now they're doing better. I just think people should get a second chance. Nobody's perfect. We should get a second chance, and we already have a list of really bad crimes that you can't get expunged. So, but we're talking about stealing or theft or juvenile cases. You don't want those to get expunged. I mean, I don't know any.
Well, let me throw out a couple of examples here of arguments against it and kind of get your response on them. I mean, first one is like public safety. I mean, generally, shouldn't we know about such things in certain circumstances? I mean, for instance, a person was convicted of embezzling from a previous employer, 3 to 5 years, enough time for that? Shouldn't that prospective employer be able to find out that this person might be a risk before putting them in a position of financial trust? I mean, that is the argument. Shakespeare said, past his prologue.
I think 3 to 5 years is plenty. They change their ways. And if usually if this a person type of crime, the DA reaches out to them and says you have an issue with them getting an expungement. If they do, then they'll have a hearing and they can state why they think this should not be expunged. But
well, and then I guess to maybe argue against that particular point or support yours a little bit, there is that passage of time, and we haven't really touched on this, but one of the things that passage of time has to include is no more criminal conduct, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so you cannot pick up any new charges during that 3 to 5 years, depending on the nature of the charge.
Yeah, but at least 2 years, no felonies. Yep.
And I believe you also have to pay any of your unpaid costs, restitution fines, all those other things have to be satisfied before you're eligible for that. I've got a couple of clients that like, well, I'd love to get that expunged, but I still owe them $600. It's like, well, then pay it, do what you have to do to get that knocked out.
Yeah, but it's a catch-22. I can't get a job to pay these fines, but I got to pay these fines so I can get a job. Under the statute, it's not really required. The statute, it requires, I think, restitution, but the fines and fees, I don't think it's required that it has to be paid before you get an expungement.
But your problem there is how do they allocate that money when it comes in? Do they
Right.
allocate it first to your fines and costs and then to restitution? Because I think restitution's at the end of that line.
Yes, it is.
So
Yeah.
I think the state's going to get their money first.
And it's just easier if you can somehow pay this off because, it's so subjective. Each judge might handle it different. We don't want that. Just see if you can pay it off or borrow from some family or something. Pay this off and you can get your life started again.
Well, I know that there's some states, not Kansas, at least not yet, that will let you get something expunged while money's still owed, but it doesn't waive the money. And then the argument for that being, well, I think there's some statistics that show that your income raises by on average 25% subsequent to an expungement. That's going to give an additional 25% of money to help pay those fines and costs. And oftentimes those fines and costs have been reduced to enforceable judgments. I know that in Johns County and several other places in Kansas, I mean, even though they're criminal convictions, they can garnish your wages, or Butler and Associates or whoever it is, the collection agency, the state
and they do
can garnish your wages to get that.
And they'll get your tax returns and they'll garnish your wages. And maybe it's too much. You can't, even if you do that, you can't pay it off,
I know that we talked about, before the podcast started, that you weren't really into politics, and since I am, one of the things that I always look at when we see these bills is how can we modify things that would make them more palatable to people. And so changes to expungement are always going to be difficult in what is either a tough on crime party, tough on crime state, or what is a tough on crime environment, which I think we're moving into following sort of the things that happened around COVID, where you've seen a large increased crime. You're probably going to get some sort of pushback on that. So what could we do to sort of mitigate arguments against that? One of the things, and I'll just get your opinion on this, is if we're going to put that in there, and I don't know if it's already there or not, is maybe a lifetime limit on expungements. Yeah, we're going to be much more generous. We're going to let people be very much supportive of second chances, for people who want to put their problems behind them. But if you violated that trust that society has given you, should there be restrictions based on your ability to do that further down the road again, as opposed to like a bankruptcy where you just get to wipe all your debts out every 6 or 7 years?
Well, you were talking about, I was thinking they're always tough on crime until somebody in their family had committed a crime.
That's true.
Or somebody says they committed a crime, then all of a sudden, oh, no. So we know racially who most people are who get stopped by the police or charged with a certain crime, even though the percentage of people saying using marijuana is the same, but somehow only the Black people get charged with this crime. So it's discriminatory and on its face, because who's going to be impacted more. Whereas this is, if they take advantage of this, hopefully this will help, make it more equitable or lower even the playing field so people can have houses and jobs and healthcare and just the normal things in life, be able to afford food and send their kids to school, No, I don't buy that.
Well, I guess the argument that I was making on that was, would it be more palatable from a political standpoint to make it easier to get an expungement? Because obviously there are benefits to getting that expungement. If we were to limit how many times if you could only do that one time.
Nope, that's Missouri. Nope, I do not like that. Sorry, I have no political I don't have any argument other than I do not like that, because that's
okay. So Missouri does have a one-time expungement, a lifetime limit on that.
You get two in your life, and then so you got to strategize which ones can you get. Oh, but you can't expunge a stealing, a theft. Oh, I can't work at any store now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you got to strategize, and you definitely would need, because I tried to work with the UMKC when they're getting ready to do these expungement clinics, and it was just too hard. Kansas is way, way easier. We could do that. That's probably why Harvard worked with us. So you can get as many as you want in your life, right? Well, hopefully you don't need that many. And who's to say the judge will grant it later? But
well, true. I mean, there does have to be the passage of time, and you will eventually either grow out or something. You're not going to continually get arrested over and over and
Yeah,
over again.
hopefully not.
Yeah.
And I think the people I've spoken with, dozens, they know the error of their ways and they're not doing that again. Or, some people that were on drugs and they had to go to rehab and now they're clean and they haven't had any issue or alcoholism or something. So, but Missouri is only two. So if you have like four cases, you gotta strategize, okay, which ones are the most important ones I need to get rid of? Because there's still gonna be twos on my criminal background check. What's
Right.
what's the point of that? How's that helping?
No, that doesn't help at all. I
I
wouldn't.
don't think it does, but
I
maybe
wouldn't.
it
It doesn't
is.
seem to be able to make a whole lot of sense to go through and pick it. So I mean, basically, if you have 3 convictions in Missouri, you can get 2 of them expunged, but not the third. That
Correct.
doesn't seem to really
In
make a
your
whole lot of sense.
life,
I would think you could.
in your life. That's it. So choose wisely. And it was just too much. I couldn't even, I was like, what? How do I know which one?
Well, so if then for Kansas, and again, I know that you're just not really an expert. Say that you got 3 separate cases over the course of a couple of years, and you were convicted on all 3 of them. And so then you're three to you go serve your time or you do your probation. You've completed everything. At the end of that probation, you've waited your 5 years. Now you come back and you want to get those expunged. Will Kansas expunge all of those as a group, or do you have to go through on each individual case and ask for that expungement?
You go through each individual case and ask for expungement. That's why those filing fees add up. So if you had three,
Okay.
95, it's like $600 filing fees. And if you pay for an attorney, that's more money. And, wherever some people have cases in different, counties. So it'll be one in Sedgwick, one in Johnson, one over here. And
Right.
so
So
you gotta go to different courts and ask for the expungement.
and convince 3 different district attorneys and 3 different judges that they should grant those to you as well. Because
That's right.
it's discretionary, is it not? So.
There is some discretion or how they want to, look at you. Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite experiences running into old clients who've straightened out their lives, and it does sound like really worthwhile work you're doing here, especially when many people don't really know that it's an option or think that it costs too much and it may be cost prohibitive, and quite frankly, a number of them are just too afraid to go anywhere near a courthouse. There's no good memories that happen to be in that courthouse. I don't want to go back there for anything. But again, if you want to give us your contact info again, to where people that want to do that, where are the best resources for finding out what's going on, as far as I know that the Kansas Bail Agents Association will typically post links to the expungement affairs from there, but
Okay.
the Kansas Bail Agents Association Facebook page is not where a world of people are going, so that's not going to be a whole lot of information thrown out there. So where can people go if they really want to look at it? Again, back to Kansas Legal
Just
Service.
go to Kansas Legal Services, the website. And if you search for expungement, a big long page will come up about expungements, and we'll list information about any upcoming expungement clinics or driving while suspended clinics, driving records clinics. We'll list those as well. Or you can email me, Springfield, just like the city, j@klsinc.org, O-R-G. And I will say for attorneys who might be listening that you'll really love it. And you get to meet people and they're very just so grateful. Even the people I've met that I had to tell them, you're too early, you can't get an expungement now, or your charge is not expungible. They just wanted to know, oh, okay. This helps them know, okay, I can't get this expunge, or I got to wait another year. Okay, I can do it. Focus or pay these fees off. Okay, I can do that. Just give them a roadmap. And they're always very, very happy to speak with us and speak to an attorney.
Thank you, Joy, for taking the time to talk to us today. This is really an important topic. It really is. I mean, while we have repeat clients and, the people get in trouble and, the goal is for everybody to move back into normalcy, stay out of trouble, stay off drugs, get everything back in, being able to get things expunged, get a better job, get better housing, get back on track. This is sort of an area of the law that those of us in sort of bail world don't really have a whole lot of contact with. So again, thank you for enlightening on this, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
You're very welcome. And if you know any probation officers who have clients and they think are ready for an expungement, send them to Kansas Legal Services.
All right, yeah, we actually probably be a good idea for bonding commission to print up a flyer, keep in their office, that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Here's some information on expungement.
Yes, that'd be a good
we give
idea.
out lots of paper to our clients, so that's one way to get things across and get the word out.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, enjoy your conference. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us today on the Bail in the Midwest podcast.